Thank you. I'll be given the task to give you 45, 50 years history in 30 minutes. So you have to bear with me. I'm Hans Forsström. I used to be a technical director at SKB, and SKB is the company in Sweden which is responsible for taking care of all spent fuel and radioactive waste in Sweden. I've been also a couple of years at the European Commission, and I've also been a director at the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. So what I will talk about very rapidly is what are we doing in Sweden to take care of our waste. First, a few words backward. Nuclear power has been going up and down and up and down in the views of the public in Sweden. When I was a young engineer, which is quite some time ago, we were planning for 24 reactors. In the end, we built 12. And they were built on 4 sites all around the Swedish coast. At the time when they were at the top, they produced about 50% of our electricity. But it has, since the mid-70s, been under strong discussions. And one of the points which has been top of the agenda has been how to take care of the radioactive waste, how to take care of the spent nuclear fuel. It's so dangerous, and it will remain dangerous for such a long time that it can't be possible to do it. Now, the bottom line is we are doing it, and we have approval of doing it. But the discussions have led to phase out of nuclear power very slowly. We had a referendum in 1980, I think it was, where we decided that by 2010 we should not have any more nuclear power. Now we still have 6 reactors in operation, and they're probably going to operate until 2040, 2050. But more important, there is a new discussion coming up on new nuclear power, including SMRs. Now, I said waste has been high on the agenda all the time. And one of the results of that discussion was that the responsibilities to take care of the waste was put on the producers of the waste. Many countries have the state taking this responsibility. But in Sweden and in Finland and in Canada, it has been put on the utilities, which in my view is extremely advantageous because we have proceeded. There's been an interest in proceeding. So the MPP owners are responsible for the radioactive waste management. They're also responsible for paying all the cost of it. In the early plans, we planned to send our fuel to reprocessing abroad and to dump the radioactive waste in the sea. This is 1950s, 1960s thinking. Today, we take care of our spent nuclear fuel by ourselves, and we dispose of it deep underground, and I'll show a little bit about that. This shows the system that has been developed in Sweden, where we take care of the waste from the nuclear power plants, but also from medical care and industry. Low-level waste, which is short-lived, goes to a repository which is in operation in Forsmark since 1988. Spent nuclear fuel goes to an interim storage facility which is in Oskarshamn. It's storage in water pools, and it will then go to a final repository which we are just now. Sorry, thank you. Never happened to me before. It's quite interesting to see how you react when something like this happens. Now, going back to the spent nuclear fuel, it's now in storage in Oskarshamn, and it will go to a final repository. I will show more details on it. But before I do that, I think it's always useful to say something. What is radioactivity? We have it around us. There is radioactivity in the ground, from uranium, radium, radon. There is radioactivity in the air, carbon-14 from cosmic radiation. But the radioactivity we are talking about is what is coming from the nuclear power production. And essentially, on the left hand here, you see what is happening in the nuclear reactor. you split heavy uranium atoms into two smaller, what is called fission products. Those are most often radioactive. Some of them become unradioactive in milliseconds. Some stay radioactive for hundreds or thousands of years. So that's the main radioactivity. But you also in fission processes get neutrons out of it. And one of those neutrons is splitting another atom, and that means that the process can go on. But the other neutrons, some of them could be caught in uranium-238 and you create plutonium or other heavy elements. And some of them could get out of the reactor and hit the steel, and you get activation products like cobalt-60, like iron-55. All of these are what you call what is the radioactivity in the radioactive waste. What is most important is that almost all of the radioactivity stays in the spent nuclear fuel, about 99%. A little bit goes out into the systems and become what is called low and intermediate level waste. But it's really the high level waste which is in the spent nuclear fuel, which is enclosed in a ceramic material. So it's actually sitting there very, very hard. And that is what we try to make sure that it doesn't come out. Now, why is radioactive waste dangerous? Well, there are two things. One is there is direct radiation coming from when the radioactive atoms send out radiation. And that you shield yourself with walls, with shielding and containment. You see on the side here, the transport of a spent nuclear fuel. You use a very large container. I'm going to show a better picture of it. The other way it could be dangerous, well, first of all, you could say that if you lift the fuel element out in the air and you stand next by it, you will die very rapidly. And that's why you're handling it underwater to provide shielding. And if it's underwater, as you can see on this picture, the men can stand there on the bridge and handle the material. So that's the one way. The other way the radioactivity is dangerous is if the radioactive particles could come out somehow and be distributed. And for that, to make sure that that doesn't happen, you solidify waste, you package it in strong containers, and we use disposal underground in engineered facility. Now, I said that the most dangerous radioactive waste is the spent nuclear fuel. It's long-lived, 100,000 years the radioactivity will be there. It's highly radiating, but you also have other types of low-level fuel waste, which is taken care of as radioactive waste. But you can see, if you are very good in potentials, here's 1 becquerel per gram, and here's 10 to the 10. So it's very large variation. And that means that you need to handle it differently. The two things on the left are short-lived and can be disposed of in a simple way. The one at the right requires much more. You also see that the volumes are small. I understand that what we are looking at here are volumes of your energy production. Here we're talking about volumes which are many, many orders of magnitude lower. And that means that it doesn't cost too much to take care of it in a safe way. And that is an important point. Now, the Swedish backhand system, I won't go into it anymore. And I think the important thing is, already at the start, the basic principles were there. Then it has taken a long time to actually implement it. We have implemented it as needed. And just now, we are in the process of getting the final license to build the final repository for the spent nuclear fuel. Also important is that there is money available. At the end of 2022, there were 73 billion Swedish crowns in the funds. And that funds comes from that on every kilowatt-hour electricity that has been produced, about 400ths of a Swedish krona, which is 0.4 euro cent, has been set aside into the funds to take care of the waste and also to decommission the reactors. Now, the seabed, we have a transport system, and since all our reactors are on the shore or on the coast, we use a sea-based transport system. It's very good because first of all, you can take very heavy loads, and with heavy loads you can put a lot of shielding on the material, around the material, so that there is no risk. Second thing is, no one sees it. It has always been the, let's say, the big issue in when you want to protest against nuclear power is stop the transport. Make sure that the transport cannot be done. In our case, this has happened a couple of times. Greenpeace has been there. We had to give them coffee, but it was rather cold for them, but it didn't stop the transport. For the low-level waste, essentially in the world, there are two options. In France and in many other countries, you build a house on the ground, you put the waste in the house, you put concrete grout around the waste, and you fill a cover on top of it, so it looks like a little hill in the end. It has to be controlled for 300, 400 years. In other countries, like in Sweden and Finland, we have chosen to go underground into rock cavities, and essentially we do the same thing. We build a house inside the rock cavern, we backfill the rock caverns, but then the difference is we don't need to have the 300 to 400 years control time. And this is the final repository in Forsmark. See the beautiful Forsmark power plants, and up in front is the entrance to the tunnels underground, and we happen to build it under the sea bottom. There are some advantages in it, but in the end it doesn't make very much difference. You see that a lot of the things are being handled remotely, and that is to ensure that the people working there do not get doses. And we have different types of tunnels and a silo for different types of waste. One important lesson learned is if you make a design for your repository early, there is a possibility to optimize the management system from the production of the waste until disposal. Now, to the big different issue, spent nuclear fuel. Highly radiating, but also it contains material. And the question which has been asked all the time is spent nuclear fuel a resource? Because it still has uranium in it, it still has plutonium in it. Or is it a waste? Because you have the waste in it. A lady who I used to admire a lot, she was she was a minister once in Sweden, but she was also the chair of the advisory group for nuclear waste in Sweden. She defined waste as a resource at the wrong place and the wrong time. And I think this is a wise thing. A lot of things in what we use we throw away because we don't think it's a resource, it's too costly. And the same goes here with the spent nuclear fuel. It costs a lot to reprocess it, and it causes a lot of new problems. For that reason, we have chosen, and Finland has chosen, and Germany has chosen, and other countries have chosen to abandon the reprocessing route and regard the spent nuclear fuel as a waste. What will happen in the future? We haven't got a clue. It might be that in the future you say it is a resource, and then you will have to look at the recycling part. But in our case, we have decided to go for direct disposal, and to do that, we need to store the fuel for 40, 50 years before we can dispose of it because of the heat that is still being produced in the fuel. We are using wet pools, and we have built it underground for war protection. Today, I think we wouldn't have built a wet pool, we would have built dry storage casks, which will probably be everywhere in the world in the future. You can still put it underground if you wish, but it's not necessarily important. But the important thing is that with the interim storage, we got flexibility. We are not in a hurry to throw away. We can store and store and store, which is sometimes a problem, because if a politician asks you, do I have to make a decision now? I have to be honest and say no. And the politician is very pleased, because you don't have to make the decision now. But what has happened is actually they have made a decision, and the decision is to go for disposal deep underground. We got a license in 2022 by the government, and now we're going through the detailed things. But the idea is that you put this spent nuclear fuel in a container. We use a copper container with a cast iron insert. And you put that container in the nicest place you can find for such a container, which is deep underground, about 500 meters down, in our crystalline bedrock, and we surround it with bentonite clay. By doing that, we can show that the container will remain tight forever. Of course, when you make a safety assessment, you cannot say it will remain tight forever. So you will have to make assumptions or find out ways by which it could break. But the primary safety function is total containment. And if it's total containment, no radioactivity comes out and it gives no doses. The secondary safety function is if the containment is breached, you have retardation in the rock. When the radionuclides, which are coming out of the fuel, slowly being dissolved, going through the bentonite clay, up through the rock, it happens a lot of things, much of it stays on the way. And in the safety assessment, essentially we can show that the consequences, the worst consequences in the pessimistic cases to the people living there is about 1/100th of the natural background, about 1% of the natural background. This is what a planned repository in Forsmark will look like. We have decided it should be built there. It's a lot of tunnels, and in the bottom of the tunnels you have holes where you have deposited the canisters. Now, I said 45 years. It's more. But we started in 1976 to look at the systems to take care of it. And there has been a lot of steps from feasibility studies to technology development and technology implementation. In between, we have ensured that we have our interim storage in operation, so we don't have in any hurry. We have a number of laboratories, and finally, after site investigations, which I will come back to, we applied to build a final repository in 2011. The Finns applied for a similar repository a few years later, and they got their license a few years earlier because of differences in our legal systems. So we got a government decision in 2022, and we expect that deposition will begin around 2035. Now, how can you say that something which should stay safe for 100,000 years can be safe? You cannot make experiments. You have to base it on a good understanding of the processes that could lead to that radioactivity was released. And you do that by using that understanding, you make a safety analysis, you identify where are the weak points, you do more studies to understand the weak points, you make a new safety assessment, and it goes on and on like that. I think we have been doing 5 or 6 safety assessments over the years. But it's very clear, the safety cannot be proven by experiments. It has to be proven by understanding of the processes. And to developed the knowledge and the understanding. We have a number of laboratories, and the most important, I would say, is our Esbø Hardraut laboratory, which is essentially a dress rehearsal of a disposal facility. You made the excavation down, you made the same investigations of the rock, etc., and you did test disposal things. And of course you did a lot of research on the way. Now, for us, the technology has not been the big issue. For us, the siting has been the big issue. And partly due to the fact that we have so much good geology in our country. So it's not easy to say this site is the right site. We have therefore made what we call general siting studies, and we concluded that over most of Sweden, this was going to be good, was going to be possible. So then we took the approach of asking the local communities, would you like to be involved in disposal of spent nuclear fuel? And a number of communities said yes, and we did what is called feasibility studies. And that's the wrong name. It's really a getting to know each other studies. To actually see, what are you interested in? Are you interested in copper corrosion? Or are you interested in the price of your summer house? And these kind of things. There are so many aspects which is coming into this. So the studies that were made jointly between the population in the communities and us. In some of the communities they had referenda, and they said, no, we are not interested in continuing. So we withdraw. Several were still interested, and then we went on to make site investigations at two of the communities where nuclear is best known, which is Oskarshamn and Östhammar, where we already have nuclear power plants. Site investigations went on for 6 years with a lot of boreholes down in the ground, making new safety assessments, and then we have had the licensing and we go for the construction. But the geology is important, and it's very important, because you wouldn't be able to do a repository unless the geology is good enough. But just as important is to have the people in the community with you. To understand that it's a siting of a controversial facility goes to hosting something which you would really like to have. And if we look at our polls in Oskarshamn and Forsmark, we are almost at 90% in favor of having these facilities, because they see the added value for industry, for other things, and they don't think the risk is a problem, because they have been convinced. It's not always been like that. We had a lot of protests in the early 1980s against investigations that were made. But we cannot emphasize more the importance of building trust. And trust and safety are the key factors for success. And trust takes a long time to get, and you can lose it very rapidly. So it's very important that you actually show to your neighbors and those who will build that you are serious. You should show them the positive aspects, but you should also be open to the challenges and potential impacts. One important lesson we have learned is be open to the concerns of the people. I mean, we almost got one guy against our project because he was afraid that there would be too heavy lorry traffics going past his house. And we heard that, and we said, okay, but if we arrange that the road goes this way instead, yeah, then it was not a problem. So it's really to understand things. So the desired result of the work has been to turn a national project into a local interest. And it's important to continue to keep the positive attitude, because We are going to be in that community for 100 years. So you have to be working with the community. So my main messages of this very rapid presentation is, first of all, disposal facilities is not rocket science. It's technically simple, but the science is challenging and the public acceptance is challenging. And some of the factors we have had for our success is that there was clear responsibilities for the implementation and the financing. The owners of the nuclear power plants were jointly responsible to implement, to take care of the waste and to pay for it. We found that we had a scientific engineering approach, which is stepwise and iterative process. You didn't go and say from the start, this works, but you have to take steps. This works this far, but we should be prepared to take a step backward if there is a need. We also think it's been important that we've had a trustworthy regulator. The regulator should, from time to time, say no. Sometimes they do it because we think they are stupid when they're doing it, but sometimes they actually are quite good in doing it. And it's important that you have this, I wouldn't call it dialogue, I would call it almost a controversy between an implementer and a regulator. It doesn't mean that it should be a negative controversy, but it should be an ongoing discussion. Someone has used the word, you're stretching the understanding to see, is this really well understood? We also find the close cooperation with local public and municipality. But the main message is that development takes a long time. 50, 60 years will probably be right. And the key factors for the success is make sure that you have the science right and the technology right and get public acceptance. And then when I showed this slide to my Finnish colleague, they said, and make it affordable. Because they have a rather different view on this than we have. But I fully agree, if you cannot make it affordable, you cannot make it. There is more information about SKB on different media. I'm too old to understand all these media, but there might be others who really understand it better. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Kokemuset, millestä on meillä paljon oppinaa. Yksi kiire kysymys.
One good question. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. Are you going to commercialize also these storages? So are you going to storage the nuclear waste from other countries as well, so we can store our waste in Sweden?
That's a very simple question to give a very simple answer to. It's illegal. It would be illegal according to present law. But we are talking about something which is 50 years ahead, and there are a lot of things that could happen in the future.
Okay, excellent.